Why is it saying? All right, I'm live. Hi, 2 people are here. Great. Can everyone hear me? Can you type in the chat if you can hear me? Because I have a microphone on. Great. Cool. Hi, Claire. Rama and Claire are here. Oh, 4 people are here. Okay, I'll just wait a bit. I'm going to take this time to drink some tea. This is chamomile and what is it? Hemp tea? Yeah. First, the German word came to mind, which was weird. How's everyone's Sunday so far? I can tell there's a bit of a lag. Oh, video games, nice. I'm also excited. I'll just wait a bit. And I have some questions that I took from Instagram and I answered those. And so I have them all compiled. And so what I was planning on doing is going through those 10 questions that I got and answering them, but also just like interspersing that with any questions that I get from the chat, which I'll be watching, and then we'll just see how it goes. And I was thinking this could go for about an hour. It can be later than that or earlier than that, we'll see. Yes, we had a great breakfast. Yeah, it was a big deal, actually. I don't know if the chat will be available after I save this, so I'm just replying to my girlfriend's comment, and they said that they had a nice breakfast with their girlfriend, who is me. I wish I could play music, and I thought about it, but when I save this later, if I play music that I like to listen to, then I could get a YouTube copyright violation strike, so I won't be doing that. I also thought to make it extra dramatic to play some church music from back in the day, but I won't be doing that. I could sing. I was singing, yeah, I've been singing a lot of different things lately. Kelly Clarkson, yeah, my girlfriend and I were singing like a bunch of Kelly Clarkson songs. What else do I know? Any requests? Ooh, maybe if anyone has a song they want me to sing, I may or may not sing it. We'll see how I feel, depending on what the song recommendation is. Panic at the Disco? Okay. Which one? 21 Pilots. Ah, Claire. So I'm glad Claire's here because Claire knows that I like to sing sad, emo, alt rock, maybe slightly punk songs at karaoke. What was that? What was this song? There are so many. Build God, then we'll talk. That would be Build God, then we'll talk would be a great song for me to sing right now. The thing is, I don't know the lyrics to a lot of songs, unless they're songs that like I don't actively learn lyrics. That's the thing. So I can't choose whether or not I know the words to songs. Like when I was singing Kelly Clarkson earlier, I know bits and pieces of it, of like, what's that one song that goes, Breakaway? It's like, da 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 da, da 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 da. But I don't know the words. So I also don't know the words to Build God, Then We'll Talk. And that's why we need karaoke. Hey, Bailey. Yes, I could make up my own lyrics. And maybe I could combine the lyrics to like songs I already do know, like uh, when I was a young man, my father said to me, what did he say? Will you join me in the Black Parade? Okay, I think I might just, wondering when to start. I'll give people a bit more time. And while we're waiting, I can tell you, um, I have like a lot of feelings about this. I'm really glad that people are here. I was recording a video and it was going well, but I answered one question and it already just took like, it took a while to answer, to like get into it, and I realized I don't know like how much people, I'm like, was this detailed enough that people who don't have like context would understand, or was it like, I don't know. Basically, I just realized that having people to interact with and engage with would be helpful, both for me and I think for the people watching. So, but it is more nerve-wracking to do it live. I've never done a live stream before, and I'm like, I was like, what if I have to go to the bathroom? What if I have to go pee or something? So I've already done that. And I have some tea, and I'll make sure not to drink too much of it. And this is I also did some deep breaths, so that's how you know like where I'm at right now. Thanks, babe. And I'm gonna save this video later, so I might just cut the part where I'm waiting for people, but maybe not. Okay, we'll start at 10, so in 2 more minutes. I'm just going to make a post to remind people, and then we'll get into it. All right, here we go. So as I said, I have 10 questions that I collected from different people, and I just compiled them and started answering them, just like bullet points. So we'll just go through these, and if at any point you want to know more or something doesn't make sense, please let me know. And if you have questions that come up that are not related to what I'm even talking about, then put them in the chat and I will get to them, because I really just want to I realize that even the questions that people ask me don't really touch on a lot of the things that I wanted to share with people. And yeah, so I think having it as like a conversation it'll make it easier to share things. And um, yeah, thank you. So the first question I got was a big one, and it's I would like to know what it is like being Black, or what it was like being Black in that particular faith tradition, and when did you start to learn about the racist history, and what impact that had on you leaving the faith tradition. Ooh, okay. So if you don't know, like Mormonism is it's the full name of the Mormon Church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it's a Christian religion. It's very white. It started in the United States in the 1800s, and it was founded by Joseph Smith. And yeah, when I was like preparing for this video, I wasn't sure how much to go into it in terms of like at first I was doing research, and then I realized I really just want to talk about my own experience, and that means um, not going so much into the research because it's whatever I have, whatever I remember. So I won't have like specifics for you. I won't have like what year exactly the church was founded, or like um, membership numbers, or what percent of the church Mormon Church is Black or white, or any of this. If you're interested, then you can look it up later, and if you have questions we weren't able to find answers online, then you can message me, and I can I can direct you towards where to look. Um, so I grew up in Utah for the first half of my life, and then I was in California for the second half. And in between that, I lived in Idaho for a bit, in Georgia, but most of my life was either Utah or California. And those are two very like distinct places for Mormons. Like Utah is where most of like the conference center is there. The Salt Lake City Temple is there. It's just Mormon Central basically. But then California is also has a lot of Mormons there, but it's like a different vibe of Mormon. Um, and there's a lot of like back and forth. So you'll have people like me who grew up in Utah, moved to California, and then they go back to Utah for either for like college to go to BYU, or they go back because their family is there. Um, but in California, the I felt like the vibe of Mormons was like more laid back, like not so not so strict with the rules, I guess. But I tended to be always like really following the rules. So it was actually for me um, being around people who were a little bit more lax with the rules that the Mormon Church had set out was kind of a shock for me, actually. So how does it relate to race? Is that in Utah, like it's so white, and the church is also very white. So it's hard to separate like racism and the religion, right? Because the religion is very white, and therefore it's very racist. There's like a lot of white narcissism, where like the pictures of Jesus that I saw growing up were all white. Everything in the videos that we saw that were, supposedly took place in the Middle East, all the characters were white, or all the actors were white. Um, yeah, very colonial. Um, and it was not only very white, but it was also very anti-Black. And is, not was. And it doesn't matter whether you're white or not. So I learned all of this stuff, and I internalized it. And before I get into specifics, I want to like point out that Native Americans, or indigenous people, um, people indigenous to the Americas, they also in the church are kind of like stigmatized, not really now, because that wouldn't be appropriate to say, but it's written into the history that we black people and indigenous people are not great people, and I'll get into that. So growing up, it did make me feel undesirable because everyone around me was white. So for example, if I went to a church dance, and I would just feel like, okay, I'm not getting asked to dance. Is that because, is that a race thing? And I feel like it was, but it also could have been a number of things related to right? Like I'm queer, so there's a lot of things I didn't know about myself, about how I like engage with people, and I just couldn't put a finger on it. So it just I always felt really out of place, and then couldn't exactly pinpoint why. Um, but I do want to get into like the anti-blackness so that this makes more sense. So in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon is basically an account of what happened in the Americas, so North America, South America, after Jesus died, and then I don't know if you're not familiar with this, like with the stories of like I don't know, just let me know if anything's not making sense. So Jesus died, and in that time when like he was not around in Israel, like this area, he was in supposedly in the U.S. Preaching to the Nephites and the Lamanites, and these are the people who are written about in the Book of Mormon. So basically, there's a cycle of these people called the Nephites, and they're white people, and when they do bad things, then their skin turns dark, and then they get punished, and there's a lot of famine and war and all of this, and then they start to fear God again, and they realize that they've made all these mistakes, and they repent, and then their skin becomes white again. So does that make sense? Like it made sense to me growing up. It was like, right, so there's a cycle of violence and corruption, and when you're good, your skin becomes white, and when you're bad, your skin becomes dark. Of course. Yeah, it's very convenient. And so not only was that like in the Book of Mormon, like all of these stories about like whiteness being connected to righteousness and dark skin being connected to what was called, like iniquity and sin and all of this. But it was also even before that. So even before, people came to Earth, it was decided that people who, have melanin would look a certain way. So the reason that I have this colored skin, supposedly, according to the Mormon Church, is that before anyone came to Earth, there was a war in heaven. So, we were basically God was like, I need all of you to go to Earth, and you'll be tested. And if you do the right thing, then you can come back and you can hang out with me in heaven. And but I need you to do the right thing. And then, that seems like a risk because we're going to forget everything that we knew from heaven. So when we come down to earth, like, what if we, act out and we don't get to go back? And then supposedly Lucifer was like, I have a great idea. How about we all come to earth, but you have no choice. So you have to do everything like according to plan. And that way everyone gets to come back to heaven and we can all hang out. And some people thought that was a great idea, but other people thought, no, I think we really should be tested and we have to like figure it out on our own. And so that was Jesus Christ's idea. He was like, people can just do that. They can have their choice, and then I will go at some point and I will, make a sacrifice so that I can atone, like I can basically cover everyone's sins. And so the Mormon Church said that there were these two, I guess, factions. One group said, yeah, let's do that. Let's do what Jesus Christ said. We'll all go. We'll have our choices, and then we can, repent because we were saved by Jesus Christ. And then the other group said, no, we want to do what Lucifer said. We don't want to have any choice because we all want to come back here. There was a big war about this, right? And in the end, who won was like the side, like Jesus Christ's plan. This is the plan of salvation, as Mormons call it. So the plan was that we all come down, and then I think the rest because we're all here. And it's I'm noticing that like as I'm talking about it, it kind of sounds like I'm telling you like this is what's happening. Like I'm telling you what happened in heaven before we got here, and now we're living it. And that's because like it's still very much within me. Like I understand the story very well, even though I don't believe it anymore. So basically, in this war, the people who sided with Satan lost, and I was on that side. Anyone who is dark skinned is that way because before we came to heaven, we wanted to go with Satan, but we couldn't because we lost. And so we still, got to go through with the plan of salvation, but as I guess some kind of punishment or reminder of like how we had chosen the wrong side up in heaven, we were given dark skin. So that's what it was like being Black, and that in Mormonism, like that is a really big thing that I just grew up believing and hearing. I was like, right, it's actually kind of hard to believe it. So there's a lot of, I guess, compartmentalizing where it's like, there's no way that, like, if you knew me as a Mormon, like, you would know, like, I was so devout. So to think, like, me who's trying to do everything right and, trying to be like Jesus, and you're saying that before I got here, I wanted to be with Satan, and, like, and that's why I look the way I do. It's like, that was really intense. So I don't think I fully believed it. I was like, no, that's racist. And I was like, that's racist, but why is the church teaching this? So someone said, did this messaging make me feel like I was bad? Mm, it made me feel a lot of shame. I didn't feel like I was, like, I knew that I was, working very hard to do things that were good. And that if I wasn't, then I could, pray and repent and go through all the motions. So I didn't feel like I was a bad person. I just felt, I guess, like, misunderstood. That happened a lot. Um, and again, this is because I said like racism and religion, they were like this. So a lot of the times, like, is it the religion or is it racism? Um, and yeah, it's not even something that I would think about a lot because when I was growing up, right, I wasn't really involved in like politics or what is politically correct. I was just getting a lot of messages, so it's kind of hard to answer if I like knew that I was feeling, out of place because of this. Um, so so even though this person asked about what it was like being Black, I did want to get into what I said about Indigenous people because this also like continued to happen and is probably still happening in the church. This kind of messaging about like skin color. I had a family friend who went through this. There was this program and I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was recent. Well, it was recent enough that I know someone who did this, and basically there were people who were displaced. These were Indigenous people who were displaced, and they were placed with white families to kind of, I don't know, like to make them better, basically to like improve their moral character and kind of like I can just imagine it's like child protective services taking someone because their family is like not white and saying we need to put you with a white family so that you can be saved. But it's not a social worker; it's the church. So there was this conference, which is like when the Mormon prophet gives a broadcast, and you can watch it either on TV or online, or you can go to the conference center and watch it live. And I don't remember exactly when this was, but they were saying, "Oh, this is working. We've noticed that the Native Americans that we've placed in these homes and in these programs, their skin is becoming whiter, and that's how we know it's working." And when I, whenever I found out, like I don't remember exactly how I found this. I don't know if it was like I read it somewhere, but I was like, "Yeah, that is also racist, like clearly." Um, Someone said in the comments, yeah, to eradicate the culture. Yeah, it was very much like just get as close to whiteness as you can, and that is not only like white supremacy, but it's like holiness, right? So if you want to go to heaven, then you need to be close to heaven. You need to be, or sorry, close to God. So being close to God means being close to white people, basically, and Black people were not allowed to have the priesthood until the 1960s, I believe, which conveniently is when the civil rights movement in the US was happening. So, at first it was like the priesthood, by the way, is it's power that men can hold. And with this power, you can heal people, like preside over your church, and just like give blessings. So it was basically like a lot of power, but only men can hold it. And you also need this priesthood to be able to get into heaven. So that means if Black people were not allowed to have the priesthood, they also couldn't go to heaven. Like they could go to heaven, but there are actually like 3 tiers of heaven in the Mormon Church, and Black people, since they couldn't have the priesthood, could not go to the highest tier, which means they couldn't. Like basically, the other tiers don't even matter. Like you just want to go to the higher tier, and Black people were excluded from that because they couldn't have the priesthood. And then, yeah, conveniently in the 1960s, this was revealed that God changed his mind and was like, actually, you know what? Like, what if we gave Black people the priesthood? And that's what happened. And yeah, again, I could actually be wrong in like the years and things because I don't know the specifics. It wasn't really relevant to me. Like, um, as far as growing up, as far as I was concerned, Black people were allowed to have the priesthood. It wasn't like I didn't learn the history of Black people not being allowed to have priesthood and such until I was much older. So yeah, someone said in the comments, cleanliness is close to godliness. This is putting it in a whole new light. So I'm gonna take a break, um, have some tea, do some more breaths, and then I'll come back to another question. Oh yeah, I also wanted to say about this. When I left the church, it was really weird because the ex-Mormon community was helpful to be around, right? We're all processing like, and I did this all online. Like there's a Reddit group, Reddit ex-Mormon, and that's where I was like learning things and just processing with people. But because the Mormon Church is mostly white, the people who leave the Mormon Church, I don't actually like the people who leave the Mormon Church. I wonder if it's mostly like if it's still majority white people or if it's like a lot of people of color are leaving because it's uncomfortable. And yeah, but even in like ex-Mormon forums, it's so white that it can still be racist, and is still racist. And so even there, when you're looking for a community, you're still like I was still like the odd one out. Like I can't think of before I did this live, I was trying to see if anyone else had talked about being a Black ex-Mormon, not to mention like a Black queer ex-Mormon. And there was one Reddit Ask Me Anything from 10 years ago. Like that's the only other record I've seen of a Black person who was an ex-Mormon like talking about it online. Okay. Um, Oh yeah, and then someone asked what impact, or sorry, this is related to the first question. So what impact did the racist history of the church have on me leaving the faith tradition? It didn't really tie into why I left, right? Because even though I didn't know the specifics of all the things that were said about Black people and Indigenous people, um, like all growing up, I was aware that there was something wrong with having dark skin, and I was still, very devout. And so it wasn't really cause for me to leave. That was already something I had internalized and like made peace with somehow, right? So the reason like that I left, I don't think this was the full reason, but it was definitely like one of the catalysts is the church's stance on homosexuality. And so yeah, I just wanted to say like race had not a lot to do with it. And I know like a lot of, not a lot actually, but I know some other people who are Mormon and who are not white. And in California, in the church building that I went to, they would have entire like sessions of church that were only for Chinese speakers. So like there were enough like Mormon Chinese people to actually like fill up an entire church room, and like so, and there were also Spanish speaking church groups, so it wasn't very like, it was mostly white, but it's not like you can't find Black Mormons or Spanish speaking Mormon, like Latinx Mormons or Chinese Mormons, or because of the missionaries going all around the world and teaching, like you will also find Mormons like in most places of the world, I think. And actually in Utah, there's like a big Samoan and like Tongan like Mormon population. I'm not exactly sure why, but I know it has something to do with missionary work, but I'm not sure like why they would come to Utah, and like that seems to be like the place where a lot of them are. Okay, so does anyone have questions before I like move on to another question? Okay. So someone said, at what point did you realize you had to leave, and which red flags did you overlook? So before I started, like preparing for this live stream and preparing for me involved like talking to my therapist and looking at old journals and yeah, just trying to like go back into memories, I guess, because I'd forgotten like a surprising amount. And so in order to answer questions, I was like, oh, I actually need to kind of remember what it was like. And um, so I thought that I'd started to, think about leaving when I was in college, because right, college is when I was like on my own and had more autonomy and stuff. But um, by looking back, I found that I actually like senior year, I was, feeling some withdrawal, and even maybe junior year. Um, and I think that, like, in my mind, it started because I um, saw this article in a church magazine that was about homosexuality, and it was actually like condemning homosexuality. But for me, just like seeing it talked about in this way, I was like, oh, so there are like Mormons who are, gay, are like struggling, and they need help with this. And for me, that was enough to just like get the gears turning, and me being like, okay, so, but why is it wrong, and stuff like this. So when I was applying to college, I really didn't want to go to BYU, which is Brigham Young University. That's basically the Harvard of Mormons, I call it, and a lot of people call it. But I really didn't want to go there, and I didn't really know why. Like for me, at the time, I thought it was because I didn't want to be surrounded by white people again, like only white people. I was like, no, I had that growing up. It was stressful. And BYU's like population, like Black student population, was 0.01%. So yeah, like there's less than 1% of Black people there, and I was like, I can't go to school there. So for me, that's what I thought it was. And while I was researching BYU, I came across this "It Gets Better" video by queer Mormons on campus, and I was crying by the end of it. And I was like, I think there's been a big mistake. I think that God actually really does love everyone, including queer people, including gay people. And I think there's been some miscommunication, like to the prophets, and then the prophets didn't get it, and then they like gave the wrong message to the congregation. And I think actually God loves all of us. And so for me, there was just a big disconnect where I really felt this, like, right, I was trying, and I felt like I had gotten this message from, from the video, and also from like, the spirit, that it was okay, it was okay to be gay. And at the time, right, I was a straight person who was like feeling all these feelings. I thought I was straight, and it was like, this is terrible. Like, there's been a huge mistake. Um, and yeah, that was like what I felt was like the start of disconnect for me. Um, But I think there were also other things going on that I just wasn't really aware of and I didn't have words for, because the Mormon Church also really, like, it really advocates against critical thinking. So if you have a question, what you're supposed to do is pray. So if you have, like, if you want to know, if your question is the church true? Is the Mormon Church true? Then you should read the Book of Mormon and you should pray about it, and just pray until you like get that confirmation that it is. But if you have any other question, then you should ignore it. Like I was told, and I say we because this is like creeping in again, but I'm not Mormon. But like Mormons are told to doubt your doubts. So if you start to doubt, like, okay, is the church true? Then the answer is don't think about that, doubt that doubt. So critical thinking was not encouraged, which meant that as I was going through this process, it wasn't like it was hard to verbalize. I was like underneath, like all this stuff was going on, and um, like on the outside, I was just like, oh, it's because gay people, and like that's what I had for it. That's how I could name it. So I think when I was talking to my therapist, I was like, yeah. So I noticed that I don't really remember my senior year of high school that well. It's going to be hard to do this live stream maybe because a lot of the things that people are asking about pertain to like when I realized, but when I realized, I also don't remember a lot of that time. Um, and my therapist said something pretty cool, which is like, it could be right. So being raised in the Mormon religion was not only traumatic, but also leaving was traumatic. There's a lot of right. If you imagine that everything that makes up who you are, you decide is no longer like it doesn't apply anymore. Everything falls apart. So it was like just think about like everything that you know about yourself, especially if you identify strongly with labels such as like Myers Briggs or your zodiac, and what else? Maybe if you have any like I have ADHD. So if imagine someone told you like none of that applies. They're all lies. You would have to build everything back up again. And so I think for me, like not having access to that anymore, like starting to realize that everything that I believed was not true. There had to be a lot of like separation, not only from the church, but from myself. And so there actually was like a disconnect where I was just like, who am I for a lot of the time? And I think that was necessary. Um, of course, it was hard then to be so like to feel disconnected from myself. But if I had not done that, like I think this was like a self-preservation thing where it was like, okay, we're just going to take a step back from everything. You're going to be really like spaced out your senior year, but then as we're like working underneath, as my brain is working to like think about things, once we figure it out, that's what my brain is saying, once we figure this out, we'll let you know. We'll let you know that you don't believe in this. We'll let you know that you're queer. And that's actually like exactly how it happened. So once I was like, oh, okay, I don't believe in the church anymore. Um, the very day that I was like, okay, I'm out, and I like told a bunch of people, and then I was like, oh, and I'm queer, I'm gay, and I had no idea. Like the entire time that I was going through this process, I had no idea. So um, I think that's like a long answer to like what point did I realize? It's like you don't really realize. There's this concept called the shelf. So if you imagine you have a shelf, and then there's like one little doubt here, and then maybe you have a second one, and basically you just put enough things on the shelf until your brain can't like compartmentalize it anymore. It can't handle it anymore, and then the shelf breaks. So my shelf breaking point, that is something I can point to, which still I think ties to homosexuality, like, and there wasn't really like a specific time. It was just that when I became like secure enough in believing that there's definitely nothing wrong with like being gay or being like queer in any way, that is what broke my shelf, I would say. But there are a lot of other things that I can't really like pinpoint. And then once I started doing research about the church, so I was like, oh, is there any way I can save my faith right now? And I started doing research, and then I learned all these things. Then I was like, oh, okay, I actually like I have to leave. Like I can't even say like I'm a Mormon who doesn't practice. I actually need to separate myself from this religion because of the harmful things that are happening. So does anyone have any questions, or if not, I'm going to take a break and look at my notes, and then I'll come back to the questions. Okay. Oh yeah, so I did have a list of red flags that I wrote down. Um, One is that, oh, thank you. Yeah, my younger self. Yeah, wow. I guess that's like what we can say. Um, so, list of red flags. One is that Prop 8, Proposition 8 was something on the ballot in California in 2000. I don't even remember what year. It was right after I had moved there, so maybe like 2007, 2008. And there was basically a vote of whether gay mar- whether gay marriage should be legalized. And like this whole thing about separation of church and state, so the Mormon Church should not have been involved, or like telling people like how to vote, but Mormons were actually very involved. So they were setting up like polling not stations, but I remember being in church, and then people like asking my mom like, okay, so are you going to sign up for this slot where we're going to call people and tell them like how they should vote. And I know like I remember being in a library, and then just like talking with my friends who were not Mormon, and just being like very like sure of my stance that like gay marriage should not be allowed. And I think that was a big red flag, just the way that this like thing that we're voting on that has nothing to do with the church was actually a big, like we were told to take part in this, but then also like told to not, like it was supposed to be like keep it on the DL, like don't really tell people that we're telling you. You didn't hear it from us, because right, the church knew that they weren't supposed to be involved, but they were actually very involved. And another red flag would be, I think, like the bearing of testimony. um, I remember one time someone had come back from college, and um, he said that he was taking a test, and he prayed before the test that he would do well, and then the test was actually really hard, and he was like, "What happened? Like I prayed, thought this would go well," and then he gets the grade, and he's like, "Oh, this is a terrible grade. What? Like, did I do something wrong?" And at that point, and like I know this feeling very well, where it's like, what happened? Like I prayed, and I've been a good church member, so why weren't my prayers answered? And as he's bearing his testimony, which for context, this is like it's a Sunday, the first Sunday of every month is a day where you don't eat. So it's fast and testimony Sunday. And so instead of the normal like having speakers who've like prepared talks, anyone can just go up to the pulpit and bear their testimony. Um, so yeah, he was bearing his testimony, and he was like, then I realized that even though I had done poorly on the test, a lot of other people had also done poorly, and they had done worse than I did, and the test was curved. So actually, I ended up getting a good grade. And at that point, I realized that my prayers were answered because God, like, had the other people do worse than me. And I was like, wait, so your prayer was answered by God like intervening and making other people do poorly because you didn't study enough to do like well on your own, and that was a huge red flag for me. And then I was like, the fact that like someone can say that this is the answer to prayer is like other people like like something happening to them that you didn't want happen to you, and now worse things are happening to them, and it's like that doesn't sit right. Um, and another red flag was like in retrospect, it's a red flag about like Black people not being able to go to heaven. But basically, everything that I learned from the point of like when I was starting to question, and then everything I learned like up until my way like when I was fully out, those are all like red flags. But because like I think a red flag has to be something you were aware of, um, like while it was happening, right? But I wasn't aware of so much of this. Like I even if I was aware of it, I ignored it. I was like, well, it's fine. Like so there's like in retrospect, everything was a red flag, but I was okay with all of it because of I was told to the ways that I was told to like interpret things. And there was actually like a lot of manipulation. Um, so anything that was a red flag, you were told to doubt, and it was considered like anti-Mormon propaganda. Okay, so how's everyone doing? I know we have some more people than when it started. Does anyone have questions, or what are your thoughts? Like, I don't want to just like go question after question. I want to take some time and see what other people have to say. Yeah, the level of indoctrination. Yeah, there are so many levels, and I don't actually know like how far it goes. Like I know people wonder, okay, so at the very top, do people actually believe this? Like, does the prophet believe this? Do the quorum of the 12, which is like 12 white men underneath the prophet, like, do they also believe this? Or is it more like when you get so high up, maybe you don't, like maybe you know something's up, but then in order to protect yourself and like other people, you just like go along with it. Um, so yeah, I don't know like how deep or how high the indoctrination goes. Someone said, hey Sarah, okay, so you said, I joined a bit late to the party, but I'm in for 3 minutes and already and already like, what? Did you say Black people are not going to heaven? Yes, that is, yeah, if you watch the recap, that's exactly what was said up until I guess the 1960s, but it was like you can't go to heaven because you don't have the priesthood, and Black people didn't have the priesthood. Um, Another comment. I feel like I didn't realize until I met you that Mormonism is literally a cult. Yes. Yeah. And just like, yeah, I want to talk about this, the concept of a cult, right? Because if someone were to ask me, like, is Mormonism a cult? I would say yes, absolutely. Um, and I wonder about like other, right? Since I've left, I'm actually a lot more comfortable like interacting with other religions. And so, like I have friends who are like of various religions, and um, I have learned more about these religions than I ever did when I was Mormon, because at the time to learn about anything that's not Mormon is just it's actually it feels like sinning. Like so, I remember a friend went to her friend's Catholic church, and she felt the spirit, like she felt good and warm, and she was like, "What does that mean?" And she was so confused because you can only feel the spirit if you're in the Mormon church or a Mormon church setting. So to be able to feel spiritual or any kind of like community connectedness, like how can you have it outside the Mormon church, right? So we were really like dissuaded from looking into anything else, which meant I didn't know a lot about like anything else, like any other beliefs. So when I think about like other religions, like especially like major religions like Catholicism, I don't really hear people calling like Catholicism a cult, and I'm wondering, is it like, are there that many differences, or do I just not know enough about like Catholicism or Presbyterianism, like all of these things, because the things that are going on in Mormonism, like it's definitely at the level where you're like, okay, that's a cult. Like if you want to leave, you can't just leave. And I think in like I know some Catholics are like, yeah, like um, you like just stop going, or I don't know if you like how hard it is to get your records out. But if you want to leave as a Mormon, you need to first meet with your bishop, who will then like really, really, really try to dissuade you, and then you'll have to have several meetings. I think there's like a time period that you have to wait, and then you have to just go through all this stuff. And then during that entire process, they'll try to guilt you, and your entire community is there, and so they're all working to like keep you in. So and that's it's really intense because your entire community is there. Um, and they will make you feel very bad. So when I left, luckily I was able to like get my name stricken from the records through this lawyer who works pro bono. There's a service called quitmormon.org, and I just signed up there, and they took care of everything. So I didn't have to talk to a bishop who would then try to guilt me. Like I was just like, I don't want you to count my name in your records anymore, and then they took care of it. Yeah, so definitely seeing some parallels with evangelicalism. Yeah, doubt is a bad thing. Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so someone here who's born and raised Catholic is giving some feedback. So they said born and raised Catholic in Germany, and there was just church going on Sundays, and I don't know. I'm not gonna surround this live. No one gives a crap. No culty things that keep you from leaving. Uh, I guess it depends on the community and how tied it is to your social life. Yeah, so that's another aspect, right? So like it's not just church on Sundays. And for example, by the way, church on Sundays was 3 hours. So the first hour is everyone. The second hour is Sunday school, and break it up into like if you're an adult, you go to adult Sunday school. If you're younger, you go to like teenage Sunday school or like little kid Sunday school. And then the third hour is broken into gender. So it's little boys and girls, whatever, and then like middle like teenage boys, girls, and then like men and women, and that was your Sunday. And then on either like Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on like where you live, there was you would hang out with like youth. So like I would have meetings on Tuesday evenings with other people my age, and we would do church stuff. And then there were other things throughout the week. And then when I was in high school, I started going to seminary, which is basically um, more church, but like it was a class. Like if you wanted to go to BYU, you needed to have graduated from seminary from 4 years of it. So I would wake up every morning, like every school day, I'd wake up at 5 so that I could get to my 5:45 a.m. church class, which would go from 5:45 to 6:30, and it was that early because I had a 7 a.m. class, and that's what I did like all throughout high school, waking up at 5 so I could go to church. So there's so many like aspects of like where church is taking up your life, going to the temple, going to other people's homes. Like you were assigned people to visit, and you would go to their homes. Like these were your like peers, like people that you already saw at church on Sundays. You were supposed to go to their house and make sure that they were, like following. Just be like, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Is basically what you ask them, and then share like a nice church message with them. But like those things, these are all like superficial level, right? Like when you hear like what is a cult, it's like things like, okay, in the temple, we we there are all these things that you do and say, rites that you are supposed to memorize, and secret like handshakes and secret like I did go into the temple, but I never got to the point where I started doing like all these like um, I don't know what to call these, like routines or like sacred ordinances and stuff. So I've seen it like on YouTube. You can watch it. You can like find these like handshakes and stuff, but there's also like, you know, underwear. Like people always ask me when they hear that I was Mormon, like, oh, did you have to wear magic underwear? No, I didn't, because I didn't get to. I never went on a mission, and that's probably the age where I would have like gone through all the things that would give me the power to wear this underwear. But yes, there was like these white undergarments, and you were supposed to wear them. Nothing was supposed to be in between you and the undergarments, and it was supposed to remind you of like the promises that you've made to God. Okay, look at some more questions. Someone said, so spying on each other. I don't know what this was in relation. Oh yeah. So when you go to other people's houses to check on them, and here's the thing, right? It never, if you're really in it, it doesn't feel like this. It doesn't feel like someone's coming to spy on you. It feels like someone that you care about is coming to like hang out, and maybe you have some food together, and then they read from a church magazine, and it can be really nice. So it's like, yeah, I don't think it's I think when I was in it, I definitely didn't feel like, oh, this is so uncomfortable, like I'm in a cult, help me get out. It wasn't until I was much older that I was like, oh, the reason I didn't feel that way is because it was working really well. And I think actually that's probably how it is. Like if you're in a cult, you're like, you're not afraid because that's what you know, and that's how you think it's supposed to be. Okay, so I have another question. Someone asked me, I'll just read the whole thing. So one of the pivotal moments for the church was when the Black 14 members of the University of Wyoming football team boycotted playing BYU in 1969, which eventually snowballed into the church drastically altering its racial policies. While a lot of attention has been brought to the Black 14 in the last several years, the only reason I know about them is because I worked at UWYO under a woman who protested with the UWYO BSA in the 60s. My questions are, one, have you heard of them? I'm curious if they get the proper reference in the LDS community. Two, if you know any older parishioners, what did the civil rights era, up to and including today, look like through the lens of the LDS Church? What were other pivotal moments for the church in regards to civil rights? Three, one of the changes made in the church in the 70s was to allow Black members of the priesthood. Have you ever had a Black or MBPOC priest? Okay. So when I saw this question, I didn't know what the person was talking about. I had never heard of University of Wyoming boycotting playing BYU, or maybe I heard about it and forgot, but it wasn't something that was like, it was not really relevant to me leaving the church. So there's so much. Everyone who leaves like has their own themes, right? So for some people, it's like inconsistencies in the Book of Mormon. For other people, it's the ways that when you go and talk to your bishop, and the bishop asks you about your sexual activity, and you're like, but I'm a young teenager. Like, why are you asking me, an 11-year-old, like if I'm doing X, Y, and Z? That's really inappropriate. Or I don't know, right? People leave for so many reasons. So what this person asked me, I have not heard about it at all. And at first I was gonna like research it, and so I could like talk about it here, but I decided there's so much that people could bring to me, and then I could go and research all of it, but it's not really relevant to why I left. So if you're interested, you could look up University of Wyoming football team boycotting playing BYU. But I hadn't heard of it, and no, they did not get proper reference in the LDS community. I'm guessing this was like taking a stance on not playing BYU because of their racist policies, and they're like, we're not going to play until you stop being racist. But no one talked about that. And then the second question was, do I know any older parishioners, and what did the civil rights era look like through the lens of the LDS Church? Again, I don't know. Like, I don't even know enough Black people who are Mormon who like lived through civil rights era. The only Black Mormons I know are I don't know any. It was my family, and then it was my like siblings and my parents, and I don't. The only like Mormons I know now are my mother and my stepfather and my stepsister. So I don't know any like Mormon. I never knew any Mormon that wasn't family. So I can't speak about the civil rights era because one, like my family wasn't like I'm Nigerian, so my parents were in Nigeria, like even like they were Mormon and in Nigeria. So yeah, there are Mormons in Nigeria as well, but like Mormons all over the world. And then the third question was one of the changes made in the church in the 70s was to allow Black members of the priesthood. Okay, so this change happened in the 70s. All right, I thought it was the 60s. Have I ever met a Black or NBPOC priest? No, I've never had a Black priest. I've had a Filipino priest, like someone in my church who's held the priesthood and was Filipino. Also knew someone who was from uh, Iran. And when I say like holy priesthood, like any like Mormon Mormon man of a certain age can hold a priesthood, but I meant like by priest, I mean like people who've been elected to a higher level. So like when you go to church, they're sitting, by the bishop, and they're sitting like facing the congregation. And most of the time, those priests were white, but a few times, and this was only in California that I experienced this. A few times they were right, a Filipino priest and an Iranian priest, but other than that, it was white people. Okay, I'll take a break. Okay, so another question was, I know ex-Mormons who are queer, and some came out while still practicing, and others came out after. How does the faith discuss queerness, and how did it make you feel growing up? Are they accepting? Okay, so something I realized is that a lot of the things that are quote bad, like you don't even get to you don't get to think about it because they don't really talk about it. So the ways you would think that for example, transphobia, you would think the way that that would get instilled in you is being like trans people are bad, but that's not how it happened. It was actually by talking about anything but that, and by saying that this is what is right. If you were to have an idea of anything outside of that, then you would know because it's not what you were taught that it was wrong. So they didn't really talk. Like I don't really remember homosexuality being talked about so much. I think since I left, they've been talking about it more. But growing up, we didn't talk about it a lot. So the way that you learned that it was not right to be gay was they would talk about like a man and a woman, and then they would talk about all the ways that that is holiness. And if you were like, they were like, this is the only way. Um, there's this thing called the Family, a Proclamation to the World, and it's basically this like manifesto of what makes a good family, and how this family can get to heaven. And it clearly says that it's like a man and a woman. So if you're not thinking about that, like just stop thinking about it, because like you don't even have to say like, gays are bad. You don't need to say like you can't be trans. You just have to say this is the one right way, and then like everyone can fill in the blanks. But when it was talked about, like I remember when they wanted to say something against like homosexuality, then they would talk about like Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible, which is basically the story of um, supposedly like there were these men who were saying like we want to see these other men, bring them down, like we want to like be intimate with them, and then they all died or something. But I know people who are like Christian and say actually the story, like even if you were to interpret it like it's like historians have like gone and looked at the story, and it's not actually saying anything about like homosexual people. It's about something else, and this has been interpreted and twisted to be like homophobic. So yeah, I don't know. Does anyone here, like, I know we have people who also were raised Christian, like, you know the story about Sodom and Gomorrah, and was that something that was, is that a way that you learned like homophobia growing up? Um, Also, like after I left, oh, someone answered. I didn't, but my church was super casual. Okay, yeah, so that's good to know. Like I know that there are a lot of churches like even after I left the church, the Mormon Church, I considered like, you know, still going to like a non-denominational Christian church, because I know there are a lot of churches that are a lot more like open, but it just in the end it didn't feel right to me to go to any church, because after being in a church for so long where you have been told and you fully believe that this is the only right church, if you go to any other church and they're like, even if they're saying nice things, it's just really hard to go from like you already were primed to believe that anything else is false. So how could like going to a different church help? So I tried it for a bit, but I was just like, they're saying the same thing that I used to hear somewhere else. Like I just couldn't. Someone said, did you ever have any experiences that seemed harmless at the time, but looking back were super sexist, racist, homophobic? I feel like I experience realizations like that all the time now that I've been out for a while, and I'm always curious to hear about other people's experiences with it, especially since I'm white. So the racism part wasn't nearly as apparent for me as I imagined it would be for a person of color. Yeah, so as I said earlier, a lot of my experiences that are now I would call a red flag, um, yeah, they were harmless at the time, but looking back, most things felt either sexist, racist, homophobic. There was a lot of sexism, very patriarchal religion. So we were like, Mormons are taught that there is a heavenly mother. So right, like if you pray to Heavenly Father, there's also a heavenly mother. It's just like don't talk about her. Like we never were taught about her nature, like why we can't like communicate with her. It was just like you don't pray to her. You just pray to Heavenly Father and Jesus. Um, and it's just kind of weird. It's like, okay, so this person exists and this is like a god that exists, but why don't we pay any attention to her? um, or other things like, um, so there's this concept of being sealed to your family, um, and basically after you die, if you were sealed in the temple, then you can be reunited with your family after you die. But if you were not sealed to your family, then I don't know. Like this is something that now that I'm out, I'm like, that doesn't really make sense to me. Like, what is keeping someone who is not Mormon or who is not sealed to their family from meeting their loved ones in the afterlife? Is it like so big that we can't find people? Or like if you see them, will there be like a barrier where you can't like I have it doesn't I can't, it doesn't make sense to me now. But at the time it was like, yeah, you need to be sealed, you know, if you want to be with your loved ones after you die. And so this is really scary if you're a woman who has had multiple partners. So I know someone who, you know, she was married to someone that she loved for many, many years. And then I think this person died, and she got married again. And she was sealed to her first husband. Her second husband had also been married to someone before they got together, and he was sealed to his like former wife. I think she also passed away. So this man then got sealed to his second wife, which means that in the afterlife he will be able to be reunited with both his first wife and his second wife. However, the woman could not be sealed to both of her husbands. So in the afterlife, she would only be able to, I don't know, maybe you have to pick which husband like you can see again in afterlife, but you can't, like, it doesn't work the same way for women. Only men can be sealed to multiple people, and women cannot. Someone said, growing up evangelical, there was also the idea that cishet marriage is holy slash a standard for everyone. Yeah, right. Like you couldn't even, cishet marriage was the only marriage. Like you can't get married if you're not cis and straight. Also, after I left, there was this was in November of 2015. The Mormon Church released a statement that was like, okay, so if you are a child of gay parents, like before it was that if you had gay parents, you couldn't get baptized into the Mormon Church. So typically, Mormons are baptized at age 8. I know, like in other Christian denominations, babies are baptized, but Mormons believe like, oh, that's not fair. Like a baby doesn't have any choice, so we need to wait until they're 8, and then that is the age of accountability, where they obviously have all the full mental capacity to make a decision for themselves as to whether they should be baptized into the Mormon Church. But if your parents are queer, you don't get to do this. You don't get to be baptized. But in November 2015, they were like, oh, okay. You can be baptized if your parents are queer, but you need to first denounce your parents. So like write a letter, denounce them, and like, you know, just let everyone know that you don't agree with your parents' lifestyle. And then you need to wait until you're 18. So you can't get baptized like everyone else. You need to wait until you're 18, because then we think, you know, like your mental processes will be okay. Like we can trust your decision. But we don't believe that if you're 8 and you want to get baptized and your parents are gay, that you really understand what's going on. So a lot of people who were the Mormons at the time, when this came out, they were like, wait, what? Like, and a lot of people left the church at this time, because to say that if you are you're a child of straight parents, and you're 8 years old, that it makes perfect sense to get baptized. But if your parents are gay, then suddenly we don't trust your judgment, and maybe like you're confused or something. Like they're like, that can't be right. And the weird thing is that every time these policies come out, it's like, okay, God said this. And I think for me, that was another reason why I was like, I have to leave, is because I was taught that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Like God doesn't change. So when all these changes started happening, like I remember women were never allowed to say the prayers in these like big church broadcasts that happen twice a year. And then people started, like women, like felt like there was like this feminist movement within the church, white feminist movement, where they were like, women need to be able to pray in church. And then they were like, okay, then there was a revelation that was like, okay, God has said that women can pray. And I remember some of my like Mormon friends being like, isn't this great? Like God said this. And I was like, don't you see that this literally just came, like, weren't you paying attention when like women were wearing pants to church and protest? Like this is not out, this is political. Like there is very clearly pressure being applied, and then they buckled and they changed their policy. So to say that this was because of revelation, it's like, why, even if it was revelation, why did God change his mind? Like I was told that God doesn't. So there's so much like flip-flopping for me that I started to be like, it seems to me that God is very like, God like wants to do whatever people are saying is cool at the time, and I was like, I'm not okay with that. Like I want God to have like, um I don't know, self-assuredness. Someone said that is so wild to hear. Yeah. In the answer to this question, so like, did I ever experience anything that was harmless at the time, or I thought it was harmless at the time? Looking back, I thought it was racist, sexist, homophobic. So there's what I just said. Then there was a thing about the church trying to make indigenous people like white and saying until their skin is white, we will know, like when their skin is white, we will know that we have done our job correctly. There was the whole Prop 8 movement, and patriarchal blessings is another thing. So basically, there was the church has like these men, they're patriarchs, and as far as I know, like I guess they could be like non-white men if you live somewhere where there aren't any white men. But if there is a white man available, then that's the patriarch, and it's a very, very old white man. And this person can give you blessings, and it's basically like it's like getting a tarot reading, and it's just like a way to lay out your future. And it's like if you do what you're supposed to do, so if you do like follow the commandments, follow the all the things that the Mormon Church says you should do, then these blessings will come true. So I actually like I have mine. I'm not going to read it, but I'll just like show you. Um, it's like back and front, and so the process is you go to the patriarch's house and you sit there, and he places his hands on your head and gives you his blessing, and then it's recorded. So then they send the recording to church headquarters, and they transcribe it and print it, and they send it to you, and you have this record throughout your life to refer to. But the thing is, you're not supposed to share it with anyone, they say. Like, it's very, very sacred. And if you share it with anyone, probably like it won't come true. But what I found when I was, researching on my way out is that a lot of people's patriarchal blessings look similar. Like there will be similar things in there, and so a lot of ex-Mormons are like, oh, okay, so the reason they said not to share it is because it's kind of like copy pasted. But there's also the concept like this is also pretty sexist. Like it's called a patriarchal blessing. Like it's just like yeah, a lot of the ways of like where an inspiration comes from is very sexist, the way that it works. So don't disrespect tarot like that. I'm trying to make it relatable, something that people can like make a connection to, like what it feels like. Yeah. But my patriarchal blessing said that I was going to wait, I'll just find it. Okay. So here's a part when I heard this the first time, I actually was crying because I was like, "Oh, that's really beautiful." And in retrospect, I was like, "That's really racist." So wait, I just lost it. Okay. Nope. I found it. Okay. So, be an example to your race and do not be ashamed of it, for you are indeed a daughter of God and he loves you. So, when I heard to be an example to my race, I was like, wow, that is so beautiful. Like, how did you know that I was ashamed? Like, that is clearly directly from God. In retrospect, I was like, well, yeah, you knew I was ashamed because for like 18 years of my life, I was taught, that I was basically Satan's spawn. But at the time, I was like, only someone who has revelation from God could know how much internal like turmoil there was about like being black and then being Mormon. Um, so someone said, yeah, I was also like, there's also stuff in here about how I'll have like a husband and we'll have kids, and at the time I was like, oh, thank God, because I couldn't, when I was a teenager, it's like I don't know who's going to marry me because with all this like race stuff going on, it really does. The older you get, the more it's like, um, this is when I still identified as like a black woman. So I was like, black women are like on this like ladder of dating. They're like at the bottom, and so it's like if I want to find like a Mormon husband, it's like that's going to be really hard because it's already hard for like Black women to date, and then to find like a Mormon man to like it's like near impossible. So I also like I was feeling like insecure about like how I would get married, and you need to like get married so that you can go to heaven. So it's a huge like. Can you imagine the pressure of like if I don't find this man, the afterlife, I will not go to heaven. And so when I got this blessing that was like, you will find your husband if you do what you're supposed to do, I was like, okay, all right, I'm good. So it was actually like really relieving to hear, but in retrospect, I was like, I don't care because I had no intention of marrying a man. I am not taking husband applications, someone said. And yeah, it just feels like really manipulative that it's like you can have all these nice things, but only if you do like what we said. And if you don't, and it's also like how do you know like how close you are like on a meter of like doing the right thing? So you know you could like make one slip up and then you're like, oh no, like does that mean I don't get a husband anymore? Like it's really mind trippy. This is a good question. Someone said, "Is there anything you learned in the church that is still important to you today?" So, yes and no. There are a lot of things that I learned from the like while I was in the church, but they're not unique to the church. So just like treat people kindly. Like yeah, that's still important to me today, but it's not unique to the church. And the fact that we were told that all that is good comes from the church, and that something can't like if it's good, if it looks good but it's not from the church, it's trying to deceive you. Like that was something to unlearn very quickly. um, but things that I learned from the church that are still important to me, actually stories of Jesus. Like I talk about Jesus a lot. um, um, I Right, like I read the Bible a lot. I read the Book of Mormon a lot. So I'm actually I do really well on Jeopardy questions that are about the Bible or about like anything Christianity. And just having like context of Christianity is helpful in the world because like even though like Mormonism is not so prevalent, Christianity was still like going around like colonizing. So there's a lot of context where it's just helpful to have in order to like understand history basically. So it was helpful to know things about Christianity, and but specifically Jesus. I was like, Jesus is now uh, I don't think of myself as a follower of Jesus. My girlfriend and I always joke about this. I'm like, no, I'm not a follower. I'm not Jesus's disciple. I'm more like a homie. Like Jesus and I are homies. And so it's kind of like if Jesus had a newsletter, I probably like wouldn't sign up for it, but I'd like to like talk to Jesus when I like see him out on the street. We have similar values. Yeah. I think I also learned about journaling, like the importance of journaling and keeping records. This was something that we were like taught to do a lot, and I actually wish I journaled more. Right, like if I had journaled during my senior year, I would have had more understanding of like what I was going through when I was like unlearning a bunch of stuff. And I also think that family history is like the Mormon Church was really into genealogy and ancestry, and the reason is that they wanted to find names of people to baptize. Basically, anyone who has died, the Mormons can like take that name and go to the temple and do a baptism by proxy, so that they can like in case that person like got to heaven and was like, oh, I would have become Mormon if I had known, but no one told me. It's like, don't worry, we actually have someone on earth right now who just got baptized for you. So if you do want to be Mormon, it's not too late. So that's why family history was so important. So you could do baptism for the dead. Now that I'm not in the church, I still think family history is important. I think it's, I'm starting to think about ancestors again and what it means to have connection to ancestors. And yeah. And I also said that I learned how to be a loner. I think that was something that I learned in the church because it was very isolating to be a Mormon, especially to be a Black Mormon. And so I learned how to be like okay with not fitting in. Like actually Mormons like pride themselves on being, the word peculiar is used a lot. So it's like, oh, we are a peculiar people and that is good. That is okay. And it's like, yeah, like I'm not Mormon anymore, but I'm still like very peculiar and that is, I'm cool with it. But I don't think like that is something that is like, that's also not something that's unique to the church. Like, and I also, even though the church was telling me that it was okay and cool to like be different, it was also making it really hard to be different, right? So like, it was not making it easy to be queer, and I still had a lot of things to work through after I left about like being different in different ways. So um, most of the things that are helpful to me that I associate with the church are not connected to the church like exclusively. Any more questions? Oh, I missed this comment. Someone said that the patriarchal blessing sounds like a horoscope. Yeah, it really is. Like a really extensive horoscope. Um, yeah. Okay. So another question was family reactions. I heard Mormons don't take well to quitters. So, oh wait, I just got a comment. Maybe this question is coming up, but what are some of the things you enjoy now that you weren't allowed to when you're Mormon? Oh, that's a great question. Okay, I'll answer that one and then I'll come back to this other question. So things that I enjoy now that I wasn't allowed to enjoy when I was Mormon is basically my entire life. So like when I was saying earlier that I had to, like I became disconnected from myself in order to leave the church because the church and I were just like the same thing. When I left, I had to rebuild everything. So, for example, I remember thinking about evolution and dinosaurs as I was like thinking about leaving the church, and I was like, oh, okay. So now that I am not Mormon, I guess that means I believe in evolution and I believe in dinosaurs. Like, imagine being, how old was I? 19. Imagine being 19 and then you're like, oh, I guess I had no choice but to believe in evolution. And like at that point, like it's such a major switch. And you like I knew that it didn't make sense to not. So I was like, well then I will believe it. But like to have that like 180, it was so intense. And that was happening in like every area of my life. So my sexuality, like like everything was just turning all these like switches. Can I have caffeine? No? Yes. Can I wear shorts that go above my knee? No? Yes. Can I wear shirts that show my shoulders? No? Yes. Um, like, so just like everything that I enjoy, I feel like yeah, was there like enjoyment in my life as a Mormon? Well, yeah, like I had friends in the church and we did fun like church things together, but like so much of it was restricted. Like even the movies and music that I could listen to and watch. Like people would ask me like, "Oh, you've never seen this movie or that movie?" And I'm like, "Was it rated R? And did it come out, before 2014? If it was rated R and it came out before 2014, then no, I didn't see it because I was Mormon at the time and I couldn't watch um, rated R movies, or I couldn't even watch PG-13 movies if I wasn't 13 yet. So I remember like when Slumdog Millionaire came out, this was actually really interesting because it's rated R. But a lot of people in church, like that movie did so well that there were even people in my church who were watching it and talking about it at church. And I was like, okay, this is interesting because like we're not supposed to do this, but people are doing it, and I still didn't. Like that's how like entrenched I was. But so yeah, once I left, like, did I watch Slumdog Millionaire? No, I could not catch up on everything that I missed. So there's a lot of stuff that I still haven't like done. I got a tattoo. Like, yes, I can do that now. Can I? Did I mention this already? Drink tea. So, yeah. So you're not allowed to drink coffee or tea. And the idea was that you're also not allowed to drink sodas with caffeine. And so the idea was that Joseph Smith was told that hot drinks are not allowed. And so that was interpreted to mean coffee and tea. Apparently, hot chocolate is okay. No idea why. But this was very like ambiguous. So some people were like, okay, so no coffee or tea, but what about like caffeinated sodas? And it was always like this like point of tension in the church until and then energy drinks came out, like caffeinated energy drinks, and people were like, okay, we really need to know, can we do this or not? And the church like released an official statement and was like, okay, coffee, still no. Tea, caffeinated tea, still no. Energy drinks, yes. And that made no sense to me. I think by the time that decision came out, I was like, how does that make sense? So like we can chug like 5 Red Bulls, but we can't have green tea or coffee, which have been shown to like be good for your health. And so yeah, like now I can have green tea, I can have coffee, I can like have alcohol or whatever. And the thing is, I don't even like I don't drink a lot of alcohol. I I'm just like not interested anymore. I think when I was like younger, I was like, oh, I can do this, and I did. But a lot of the things that I was told to stay away from, it's like if you give people the choice, you can find out that they still can make their own decisions. So a lot of the things that like, or even caffeine, like I don't have that much caffeine because sometimes it doesn't really help me, and sometimes it makes me feel sick. So I have ADHD, which means caffeine like interacts with me like in ways that it doesn't interact with people who don't have ADHD. Um, oh yes, I can be gay. Like there's just like everything. Um, uh, like yeah. So I think I answered that question, but someone said, I didn't know about the coffee tea thing, and that is hilarious, especially since Red Bull seems okay now. Yeah. Any energy drink is okay. You're just not allowed to have caffeinated teas or coffee or alcohol or yeah, drugs. Um, what else? Yeah, there are so many rules like about movies, right? So nothing that's rated R. What else do I enjoy? Um, I enjoy I enjoy like writing. I enjoy like oh, I remember when Harry Potter came out. Like it's funny to talk about Harry Potter now because now that we know like J.K. Rowling is transphobic, but when Harry Potter, I think the third movie came out, that was the first one that was not PG-13, or the first one that was not rated PG, and I wasn't 13 at the time, and I went and saw it with my mom or with my friends, and then I came back and I told my mom because I was so guilty. I was like, Mom, and I was like crying. It's like I saw the movie. I saw Harry Potter. I know it's not PG-13. I'm sorry. And yeah, now I can like watch whatever movie I want without feeling guilty, and that's great. Okay. So another question was family reactions. I heard Mormons don't take well to quitters. So as I said earlier, my family, like all of my siblings, have left. They actually left before I did, so I was the last one to leave. And actually, once I like left, I was like, why didn't anyone tell me? It would have been so nice to know. But I get why, because it's something that you really just have to like make that decision for yourself. And so even like people that I know who are Mormon, like it's really interesting like being on the other side because like when you're Mormon, and someone's leaving or like, like not coming to church so much anymore, they really encourage you to pull them back in. Like, we call these people inactive, and it's like, oh, they're inactive, so we need to activate them again, and we need to like, bring them back. And so you really feel like you have the right to do that, not just the right, but the duty. But as someone who has left the church, I don't feel like, okay, I need to take people out of it. Like, I'm not like, oh, I've seen how harmful this is, so I should like try to like deconvert people. I actually feel like, because I don't, I think there's some kind of shame or something where I don't want to come across as an aggressive like Mormon basher, and so I actually hold a lot of things in, and that's why it was important for me to do this live stream, because I was like, there's a lot of stuff that is hurtful, that has like deeply hurt me and other people that I know, and we don't talk about it because we don't want to seem like we like, are just like hating and bashing your religion. I don't think, again, like I said, now that I'm not Mormon, I have more of a like respect for all religions, and I don't feel, afraid if someone's like like practicing religion. The only thing is like if you are hurting people, then yeah, that's not cool with me. And the Mormon Church does hurt people, and will like take people away from their families. And if um, like the way that people are ostracized in the Mormon Church means there is like um, the like young teens are at a great risk, especially in Utah, because when their family kicks them out, then they're on the streets, and it's just, yeah, it's really sad. So okay. Oh yeah, so I was finishing this question. So I was when my siblings left, they didn't, try to take me with them. And then when I left, I was like, oh, I wish I had known earlier, but it's okay. But so now that we're all out, like it's fine. Like I had their support the entire time. However, my mom is still Mormon, and she did not take it well at all. And my stepdad, he was actually he's Mormon, but before he became my stepdad, like before my parents got married, he was Catholic, and my mom, um, like she wouldn't marry him until he converted. So now they're both Mormon, and we like I don't have a relationship with either of them. So I think that yeah, this person is correct that Mormons don't take well to quitters. Like if you try to quit, they will reel you back in to the best of their ability, and it's seen as like they're trying to do you a favor, right? Like they are just trying to make it so that you can go to heaven, and like you can have the best afterlife. And that's the funny thing, is that it's like it's always about the afterlife and not about like the life that you're living right now, but, like the life that we can confirm. So like, if you have someone like me who like figures out that they're queer, and they're like, okay, this church is not good for me, this church actively like hates me, then they will still try to figure out a way to keep you in it. Yeah. So I have a few more questions. Before I go into those, do I have any questions from the comments? We're already at 1 hour and 38 minutes. I did not expect it to go this long, but thanks for sticking around. I hope it's interesting. Okay. So someone said, was there a moment when you were still religious that you knew it wasn't for you? Um, I feel like I've kind of touched on this before. Like, yeah, there was basically a gray period where I was like, I'm Mormon, but this doesn't feel right. And I actually was wondering the other day why, right, if my senior year of high school and like around junior, senior year, right, I was starting to feel like uncomfortable, but then when I got to college, I was still like, why was I still associating with it if I was already feeling disconnected from the church? Like I remember my freshman year, the Book of Mormon musical came to St. Louis. I went to college in St. Louis, and my friends were like, "Oh, we want to go," and I was so hurt by that. I was like, "Why would you go to see this musical that makes fun of my religion?" And then in retrospect, I'm like, I don't get why that was hurtful to me. But I think again, it wasn't actually about the religion; it was about me as a person. And because those were so connected, it was hard to it was hard to let it go because it meant letting go of myself. And so I think that's why it took as long as it did. Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there were about other moments when I was like still religious, but then felt the church wasn't for me. Mm, yeah, I think this thing about like God changing like plans all the time, like the thing about Mormon women being allowed to pray in church or like being allowed to pray in the general conference. I think that decision came when I was a freshman, and I was like, I I don't that sounds wrong. Like, why do things keep changing? Um, And oh, I also wanted to say this thing about children of like gay couples not being allowed to get baptized until they've denounced their parents and then turned 18. They actually revoked this in like 2019, I think. They were like, okay, never mind, and you can get married or you can get baptized if you want, even if your parents are gay. I'm not sure if they still keep it as like age 18 or if they're now allowed to get baptized at age 8, but it's just like there is so much like back and forth that is like clearly coming from um, the reactions of like both Mormons and non-Mormons, like right because when the Mormon Church makes these kinds of decisions, and they also get press. Like people will write it, like journalists will like cover this and be like, "Oh, the Mormon Church made this like decision where they're saying that like you know people have to denounce their parents if they're gay, and that gets coverage and it's really bad press. And so when they do damage control, that also involves saying that God made a mistake. But of course, it's not going to be framed as a mistake. It's going to be a new revelation. Someone said, "What were the attitudes of white Mormons around you? Were they more racist than other whites?" So the attitudes of white Mormons around me was when we actually talked about race, then they were apologists, and this was even non-black people of color. So I did have this experience, and this was after I left the church. Someone messaged me, and this person is East Asian, and she messaged me and was like, "Hey, I just read this thing. It's called Blacks in the Priesthood, and yes, Mormons were like calling people blacks, and it's called Blacks in the Priesthood, and I read it, and it was actually really good. Can I send it to you?" And I was like, and right at this point I was already out, but I was like, "Yeah, go ahead, send it." So she sent me this thing, and it's this long, like bunch of essays about how, you know, they did a lot of considering about like whether Black people should be allowed to have the priesthood, and there was a lot of praying and like then they realized that maybe someone had made a mistake. And basically, I've seen ex-Mormons describe this essay, which they have changed from blacks in the priesthood to race in the priesthood because they realize it's probably not cool to call black people blacks. So people say that race in the priesthood is basically throwing a bunch of people under the bus so that they can save face now. And I'd say that's a good description of it. And so, yeah, that's like a very apologist essay, the way that it was like, well, Brigham Young and so said this, and they, made a mistake, and they were acting as men, and they maybe didn't understand what God like. It was just when I read this, it was actually like I felt like sick. I was like, this is I can't believe you sent this to me, and you told me that you enjoyed it. And so I actually responded to her. I was like, wow, I read that. What was your favorite part? and she didn't respond. So it's really like, it's hard to, like, I actually understand, like, if someone's like, what is your favorite part of this racist essay? Like, you can't really wrap your mind around it because, again, like, this lack of like critical thinking, and like, like, I think at some level she knew, but then in order to express how she knew that would involve like denying the church, and so they just won't talk about it. So it was actually the same with like with this decision about um, children of like same-sex couples not being allowed to get baptized. I was actually in Japan. I was studying abroad when this came out, and I met some missionaries who were serving a mission in Japan, and I was like, why not? Like, there's some level of nostalgia here. Like, what if I just like meet up with them? So I met up with them, and I was like, hey, what do you think about this thing that just came out about like Mormon kids not being able to get baptized and having to like reject their parents? And they said, well, I think that even if it doesn't make sense, that like God has an answer. Like, we may not know, but like we just have to trust that that's what God wanted. And that's kind of the reaction you'll get about anything that doesn't really like, anything that could be hurtful or racist or homophobic or sexist. It's like, well, we understand that it looks that way, but God actually understands what's going on like under the surface. So you just have to trust that. And so that was basically the answer that I would get anytime I tried to bring up something that was like racist or homophobic. And so question 10, the last question I have from someone, which is, what is your response to the church's lack of apology for racism? Like, I wasn't expecting anything. I don't have a response to the lack of apology because I wasn't expecting anything. Um, and if anything changes, I know it's going to be like when the pressure is to, like, it always happened this way. The Mormon Church used to practice polygamy, and then, right, this was something that was from God. God said that you should have multiple wives. And then at some point they stopped doing this, and now the Mormon Church like very strongly denounces this. And there are branches of the Mormon Church that are like for example, there's the fundamentalist LDS, and I remember like when I was Mormon, I was like, oh, like the FLDS, they like practice polygamy because they don't like, those are the bad Mormons. Um, and so it was very known that like polygamy is bad. And it's like, okay, so then why is it in the church history? It's like, I don't know. Like, we just made a mistake. But actually, like when I got older, I learned that before Utah could be made a state, they were actually prevented from becoming a state because of the way that Mormons practice polygamy. So in order to become a state, they were like, okay, we have to let this go. So they got a revelation, which was that like Mormons should no longer practice polygamy, and then Utah was able to become a state, and that's what happened there. So if anything were to change, like, right, it already has changed. They did allow Black people to have the priesthood, and again, that was tied to the civil rights era. So I'm not expecting an apology the same way that I'm not really holding my breath for reparations. And that's what I have to say on that. So those are all the questions that I had. And if anyone has any questions that I didn't see earlier on Instagram, feel free to ask me now. I'm just going to take another little break and think if I have anything else to say. Otherwise, I will say goodbye. And thanks for joining me today. It was really like, it went way longer than I was expecting, and I was definitely like nervous at first and also throughout, but it was also nice to just like be witnessed like this. And I know that people are going to be watching afterwards when I save the recording. So I also realized that it's not something that I can talk about just like all at once. So initially I thought I was going to make a video answering these questions, and like there's no way. Like, it took me an hour and 48 minutes to get through all those questions. And something that prompted me to make this video or like do this live stream, I had been thinking about it, and then I was like, no, I can't talk about it because I don't want to come across as an angry Mormon basher. And then I saw a YouTube channel created by a Black Mormon. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll find it easily if you look for it. But if you do, just I don't know, when I saw it, I was really sad because I was like, I've been there. Like, I know what it's like to be Black and be Mormon and, be making all these excuses and apologies for a religion that doesn't care about you, a church that doesn't care about you. And so, this person has videos and videos like apologizing and covering for the church. And I was like, if this person can devote an entire channel to backing up the church, I can say what I've been like, wanting to say, but then feeling like I shouldn't. So that's why I did this video. And I think what I learned from this is that it's not something that can be covered just once, right? Like this person took up their entire channel was about talking about the church. I don't think I will like make my YouTube channel about like being ex-Mormon, but I think there's a lot to say, and it will take several times for me to like work like tell these stories before I feel like I've actually said all there is to say. Because I really didn't get to the parts where it's like someone's like, oh, so I understand that it's a cult. I usually don't even get there because it's so like close to me. There's one thing I wanted to share, for example. It's called Heart Cell. And Heart Cell is a company that uses it's a company owned by the Mormon Church, and they use it's basically strategic emotional manipulation, and they use this to like to make people feel things. So they say it works like this: feelings, thoughts, actions. That's their order of like that's their target orders. So first they go for your feelings. So when you go to general conference, for example, I don't know if this is true. It very well could be, but there's this organ, and people say that heart cell, the organ plays music at like a low frequency that you can't hear, but you can feel. And when you feel that and the prophet is like speaking at the same time, then you're like, oh, I feel something, and the prophet is saying that like gays are bad, and you're like, oh, that's a spirit. And it's like, no, you're actually feeling like you're feeling what has literally been crafted to make you feel and then think and then act against like the things that they've taught you are wrong. Like so they there are like there are thought patterns and speech patterns. Even like when you go on a mission, they teach you specific speech patterns that have been like statistically proven to work and like make people feel certain ways. And then you can, once you get them in their feelings, then you can do anything. And so that's something that it's like I don't really, when I found this out, there's an entire like corporation that is called Heart Cell, and that is their goal, is to like manipulate people's emotions, and that the church owns this corporation. I was like, okay, like these are the things that you learn where um when those are the things where it's like I don't think that people like understand like how deep it goes. And it's hard to like, even if someone were to ask me like what is it like to be Mormon, it's like how do you get the conversation to like the things that um I don't know how to describe it. Does that make sense? Anyone want to let me know in the comments? Like basically my question is, do you get why someone like in my position, why it's hard to like communicate exactly what it was like to be like Black Mormon and then like later found out that they're queer? Because it is something that I want to talk about, because it's so like anyone who knows me, most people don't know um, that I'm Mormon, or they don't know like about my Mormon past. Like even my girlfriend doesn't know much about it. But it's like that's so much of who I am, right? Like the first 19 years of my life was that, and I'm 25 now. So like the me that like think about how much of that was influenced by Mormonism, and it's like, yeah, even for me, it's kind of like shocking sometimes because I don't feel connected to it at all anymore. But when I think about it, I'm like, there's still a lot of it that like has influenced me and is like hard to pull apart from like what is me and like what is like the Mormon Church. Thanks, Claire. I'm glad it makes sense. I'm just looking at what I wrote down to see if there's anything else I want to share. Oh yeah, I remember there's like when I started thinking about like homosexuality and just the concept of gay people. The person that used to drive me to school, like from seminary, in high school, I remember one day I showed up to seminary and people were crying, and I was like, "So what happened? Like, why are people crying?" And someone turned to me and was like, "Didn't you hear? Like, so and so is gay." And I was like, "Oh, like that's why we're crying." Like, so at that point, like I like looking back, I definitely had started to like pull away because for me to be like, okay, but why are you crying? Because so and so is gay. Like, um, yeah, it was just like, yeah, it was really, it makes sense that I ended up leaving because, well, if I hadn't, then I would have known myself, right? Like I'm queer, non-binary, trans, like to be stuck in that sense of not knowing myself for like my life, that would have been terrible. So glad I'm out. Glad that I figured out my sexuality and I'm like learning about gender and all of that. And um, yeah. All right. I think I will end it here. Thanks, everyone. I'll stick around for a few minutes to see if there are any comments. But thanks for coming and for joining me, and hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Oh, and if you have any like feedback or questions or comments, then feel free to DM me and be happy to hear. Like if you, yeah, if it's brought up anything for you or whatever, we can talk about it. But yeah, see you later. Thanks for coming.